earlier this evening with my two daughters. One is elementary school age while the other is in middle school. We had looked around the school supplies for about a minute, then rounded the corner to see the Halloween candy on display. As we turned the corner, a slightly older guy came really close to us, kinda like he was in a hurry, and he almost ran into our cart. He didn't have a cart or any item of his own. I said, "Excuse me," and then stopped in front of the candy to let my youngest ask a bunch of questions about the candy pumpkins. The man stopped quickly and he started rummaging around the candies right next to my daughter. He was acting strange when my daughter then said she wanted to take a picture of the candy. He was being really twitchy and caught my eye and looked away very quickly. We moved on to the women's PJ section to look around for a few minutes when I noticed the same man passed by really close. He was turning right towards the shoes with a big bag of candy cradled in his arms. My girls went across the aisle to the boys' clothing section while I finished deciding, and when I was catching up with them a couple of minutes later, that guy was winding through the boys' clothes right towards my daughters. He had kind of paused and looked confused or lost, and he watched me discuss sizes with my youngest. This is when I started thinking that something was definitely off with this dude. I mentioned him to my older daughter, and then we moved through the partition to the girls' clothes. I didn't see him again for a few minutes, and I figured out it was nothing, but then he came into that section and he was acting like he was trying to pick out a Justice shirt. He still had that big bag of candy that he just kept adjusting his grip on. I kept seeing him take quick peeks at my girls, but then every time he saw me watching him, he pretended to be occupied in his shopping. I told my eldest that I thought he was following us, and she said that she noticed the same thing. So I made my youngest get in the cart so I could keep an eye on them both. The guy then walked out of the girls section, but he looped around the partition back to the boys section, then stopped at the opening on the other side, but still in the line of sight. The man caught my eye again, twitched, then pulled out his phone, then texting someone, then walked away. By that time, I was now on high alert and possibly getting quite paranoid. I looked around and I saw two slightly older men standing around. One was in electronics, kinda looking at a half-empty display of something. But I swear, he glanced at me several times, even though there were 3 or 4 racks of clothes, as well as a hallway with occasional people in between. The third guy had wandered into the girls section and he was apparently considering buying a Justice shirt too. Every time he saw me noticing him, watching us, he wandered down the baby aisle, but he just kept coming back. After a couple of minutes, I realised now looking back that if I had really suspected something bad, I should have just gotten my girls and got the hell out of there. Clothes shopping for a picky preteen isn't fun. I really wanted to get it over and done with. On top of that, I kept second guessing myself that the other 2 guys were just a coincidence. I kept my girls really close, and after we moved to the women's section I didn't see any of them again, and I stopped feeling creepily that we were being watched. Now it's the middle of the night and I'm pretty freaked out, wondering what could have happened, and just continued to let my girls wander around. Should I report anything? I can't imagine anything would be done, just because I noticed some guy watching my daughters in Walmart. So yeah, I'm really not sure how to proceed with all this. I don't really know if something bad was happening, or if it's just me being paranoid. If anyone has any ideas, please let me know. So I've been working at Walmart for about 3 years now. It's not the best job, but it has decent pay and was enough to pay half the rent, while my boyfriend paid the rest. I work and go to school full time, so managing both my job and school was a hassle. One week, my managers, being the jerks they were, gave me a week of closing shifts. This was really inconvenient, as I had a 7:45 AM class on Wednesdays, but they didn't seem to care about that when I spoke to them. It was annoying to say the least, but I sucked it up and worked my shifts as scheduled. The night shifts usually consisted of us cleaning, putting things back on shelves, etc. Well, one night during the week, it was 10 minutes before we closed, and the only ones in the store were me and my other co-worker Seth. Seth was counting up the registers while I was mopping the floors of all aisles. At one point while mopping, I go down one of the aisles and see a man looking at the shelves of arts and crafts section. This was odd, as Seth and I did a sweep throughout the store to make sure everyone was gone, and we didn't see this man anywhere. I wasn't sure what it was, but I started to get this weird energy off him, and not the good kind. I politely told him that the store is closed and that he would have to come back tomorrow. He looks at me and continuously apologises, telling me that he just had to pick up one more thing. After all, we had just closed just a few minutes ago, so I made an exception and told him to get whatever he needed, but to make it quick. That being said, I finished cleaning and radio Seth to say that we still had one more customer in the store. He said that would not be a problem and that he would ring him up. With that out of the way, I decided to put the clean supplies away and took that time to use the restroom before I clocked out. Now the restroom in the front has been out of order, which meant I had to use the one in the back of the store. I go into the bathroom, take off my vest and do my business. About 30 seconds later, I hear the door to the bathroom open and someone step inside. For some reason I thought it was Seth, telling me that he was leaving or something, and with that I called out his name. However, I didn't hear a response back, and that's when I texted him asking was he at the back of the store. He instantly responded saying no, and that he was still waiting for that other customer. That's when I looked up and seen an eye staring at me through the crack of the stall. It's safe to say I screamed the loudest I've ever had to, pull up my pants and basically rammed the door, pushing the man to the ground. I ran to the front of the store and told Seth everything, and so he called the police. Thankfully, the police station wasn't too far from here, so they were able to have an officer over here within 2 minutes. Police told us to get out of the store while they went inside, as they didn't know if the man was armed. It turns out he actually had a 4-inch hunting knife he took from our outdoor section. He had it in his back pocket, and God only knows what he was going to do with it. He was arrested, of course, and had actually done similar things before. He had been put in jail before, but was released for good behaviour. This time I'm not sure as how long he will get in jail, but I hope it's for a while, as that was probably the scariest thing that ever happened to me. If something feels off or wrong about something, I strongly suggest that you always trust your gut. It may just save your life. This world is truly an unsafe place. A while back, when my youngest son was 6 years old, we were both out shopping at Walmart. It was his birthday coming up, and I told him that he could pick out a toy in the toy aisle that was under $30. We were browsing the aisles carefully. My son wanted to see every single toy, make sure he got the best and exact one that he wanted. He ended up finding some big Lego Batman set, started begging if this was the one that he could have. I asked him what the price was on it. He looked on the shelf and on the box. He said it didn't have a price. Just at that moment, there was a Walmart associate standing pretty close to where we were. I saw that his name tag read Greg, heard our price conversation and offered to check it for us on his device. When I told my son to go ahead and give it to the man to scan it, my son walked up to 5 feet, took it, gave it to Greg and handed him the Lego box. Also at that moment, I was getting a phone call, and I reached into my purse and saw that it was my husband calling. I turned my head briefly from my son and Greg to answer the phone. I now realise this is where I really messed up. After my brief phone call ended about my husband needing extra socks, and I turned around only to see that my son and Greg were no longer in the toy aisle with me. I mean, like, at all. The only thing I saw was the Batman Lego set on the ground that my son wanted to get. And this immediately raised red flags in my heart. And I started sprinting up and down the aisles, calling my son's name out. I knew I looked like a crazy woman, but when your child is missing, none of that matters. Minutes passed, and I still could not find my son and that guy anywhere. And when it comes to a missing child, every second counts. I ran up to the front and started telling the Walmart workers to lock down the aisles because I couldn't find my son. They asked where I saw him last, and I told them in the toy aisle with the worker Greg. They gave me a puzzled look and said that there was no worker here by the name of Greg. That was literally horror to my ears. In my haste, a man came up to me and saw how distraught I was. And he asked could he help me in any way. And I don't know what it was. I truly believe it's a mother's intuition, but I just knew right then that I needed to go outside and check the parking lot. To my absolute horror, at the very back end of the parking lot, I saw my son being put into the car, flailing his arms around and screaming for help. The man who was standing next to me, he didn't even hesitate. He full on sprinted over to my son. I was following close behind. Greg had just shut the back door and was getting into the front to start the car when the man that I was with body slammed the shite out of him. He literally grabbed him by the throat and then used his other free hand to start smashing his face in. I grabbed my son out of the back seat while the guy beat the ever-living out of Greg. Thankfully, police were very close by and they were on the scene within minutes. It turns out this guy Greg didn't work for Walmart. He bought a fake vest on Amazon and was wearing it to pretend to blend in. The man who helped stop the abduction, his name was Richard. He was literally my hero that day. And since then my husband and I have become good friends with Richard because of how greatly he helped us. But guys, there are people out there who do this shit more than you think. I do fault myself for not watching my kid like a hawk. You need to be on alert at all times, especially if you have young children. I cannot even imagine where or what condition my son would be in and if we didn't stop Greg that day. That wasn't even his real name. He's a total waste of human space and is now rotting in jail for the next 30 years. Please be alert and be safe, everyone.